It's your Wednesday daily delivery. I'm Michael Rand. Glad to be back for another day. Hope you guys are as well. Thank you, as always, for listening, for sticking with me. Good show today. Jeff Day from the Star Tribune, a multi-platform editor who helps cover the Gophers volleyball team, a beat that's become more interesting, I think, as time has gone on, and is certainly interesting this year with the arrival of new head coach Keegan Cook. Jeff and I will talk about the upcoming season. The Gophers open on Friday against TCU. That is at the Sports Pavilion, the Maturi Pavilion, I should say. And just a lot of anticipation for what's ahead for this program. A long history of success, but now Keegan Cook taking over for head coach Hugh McCutcheon. What does that mean for this season? What new wrinkles will he bring to the program? And things like that. So Jeff and I will get into that and more here in just a little bit. A controversial Lynx game. We'll get to that in a few minutes. And a well-told sad story by Patrick Royce. We'll get to that at the end of the show. First, though, what did I miss? Twins lose 7-3 to the Brewers, and really one inning and maybe one decision tells the story in this game. Twins had a 3-2 lead going into the sixth inning. Bailey Ober, not a good first inning, gave up a couple of walks and a home run. The first walk was before the home run, so 2-run first inning. Twins tied it on a Christian Vasquez home run a little bit later to make it 2-2, and then went ahead an inning or two later. So they get to the sixth, and it's 3-2 Twins. Ober has been much better since that first inning. He'd retired 8 batters in a row. He'd only given up 2 hits in the entire game, so that one home run in the first inning and then 1 hit the rest of the way through 4. He's sitting at 78 pitches, which is okay for 5 innings, I think. Like, not cause for serious alarm. And Ober, probably like a lot of Twins fans watching the game, had this mindset going into the bottom of the sixth. Ober quote from Bobby Nightingale's story in the Star Tribune. I was expecting to go out for the sixth. I was about to take a couple steps out of the dugout. They told me to stay put, and someone else was coming into the game. That someone else ended up being Dylan Floro, acquired by the Twins in the Jorge Lopez trade. Really the only move they made before the trade deadline, and it did not go well. Dylan Floro gave up a couple hard hits to start the inning. A lot of soft contact after that, but it didn't really matter. The Brewers were putting the ball in play. They were generating a lot of hits through and over infielders, and ended up being a 5-run sixth inning. That ends up being the entire rest of the scoring for the whole game. A 7-3 loss for the Twins that, to me, underscores both maybe a problem with philosophy and a problem with roster construction. The philosophy problem is this. Now, Baldelli conceded that a little bit of what went into the decision was they're worried about the number of innings that Ober is going to end up throwing this season. He's, a guy who's in his first full major league season, hasn't thrown a ton of innings in his career, is well over 100 this year, which again isn't that much in the history of baseball, but is suddenly a lot in the modern game. If he keeps on pace and makes another 5 or 7 starts the rest of the season, probably push himself up over 160, 170. Again, thresholds that don't seem unreasonable, but that the Twins and other organizations to a certain degree have deemed markers of, hey, we got to watch out for this. So they're maybe trying to limit his work. The problem with that is this. It's August 23rd today. It was August 22nd of the game. You are still trying to win this division. And Rocco Baldelli said, we are still trying to win this ballgame. That is first and foremost. But if a pitcher's innings and pitch count is in the back of your mind when you're making these decisions on August 22nd, and you're still nowhere near clinching this division. You're in a good position. You were 6 games up going into the night. Oh, by the way, you're 5 games up now on the Guardians and just 7 on Detroit. Watch out for Detroit because they're playing better than anybody else, I think, right now in the division, aside from the Twins, who have still been a pretty good team since the All-Star break. But if you're so focused on the future right now on August 23rd now, August 22nd when it happened, That's a problem to me. That's a philosophical problem to me. Let Bailey Ober pitch another inning right now. If you get to September 15th and you have an 8-game division lead, something like that, if you have done all the things you need to do for the next 3 weeks to make this a near certainty or certainty, that's when you start making all the decisions to rest guys, to make sure that they're fresh for the postseason, to make sure they're not being overly taxed for their future. Let's not make those decisions in August when you're still trying to win the division. So that's problem number one for me. Problem number two for me is that if you take if you take Bailey Ober out of the game after 5 innings, after 78 pitches, after 2 hits and 2 runs, you probably are conceding that you need 4 relief pitchers. Unless something gets out of hand one way or the other, you're going to have to use 4 high-leverage relief pitchers. As it turns out, they only really had to use 1 because Dylan Floro had a blow-up inning, and it ends up being 7-3. They don't have to use these other guys. But if you end up taking Bailey Ober out, you have to have 4 guys in the bullpen that you really trust. Name 4 Twins relief pitchers that you trust right now in the bullpen to pitch in high leverage situations. I don't know if I can. And that's a problem with roster construction. That's a problem with they didn't go get 1 or 2 really, 7th, 8th, 9th inning guys at the trade deadline that they probably should have. Because guess what? When you get to the postseason, when you get to these September games, there's going to be more starts like this. There's going to be deeper at-bats. There's going to be games where your starter goes 5 innings, 99 pitches, has given you maximum effort, and you have to get 12 outs from your bullpen. This was not one of those games. But the larger point is this. I don't know if you have 4 guys that you trust to get to the end of a game like that. I think you trust Joan Duran, although he's not been as dominant lately. I think you're starting to maybe try to trust Emilio Pagan, even though that's a dangerous, slippery slope. I think you'd love to trust Griffin Jacks, but he's had some blow-up innings lately. I think you trust Caleb Thielbar in certain situations, but I don't know who else beyond that you really trust right now. And I don't know if you have complete trust in all 4 of those guys. Some of that trust is pretty shaky because of recent results or past results. So the more you can get out of your starters, and listen, the Twins have gotten a lot out of their starters this year. They've pitched the 3rd most innings in the majors. So I'm not saying this is a everyday problem. What I'm saying is this. I don't think you have the relief pitchers that you can trust, and I think if you are starting to watch your innings already in August, that's a problem. Get yourself to September. Get yourself a bigger lead. Get yourself to a point where you have 2 or 3 weeks where the leverage isn't as high. That's where you ease off a little bit. Right now, win these games because you just gave away a game yesterday. You gave away a game that was imminently winnable. You gave away a game that suddenly gave new life to the teams that are chasing you, even if it is just, 5-7 back now. You've got 6 against Cleveland coming up here very soon. Cleveland can erase your lead in 1 or 2 weeks really fast if they get on a hot streak. You got to take these wins where you can get them. You got to take them where they are. I don't think the Twins seized that opportunity on Tuesday night, and I think that is a problem. The Lynx, meanwhile, had a controversial finish, held on to beat Dallas 91-86. Dallas had handed the Lynx a whopping lopsided loss at Target Center earlier this year. A lot of tension in this game. 2 teams battling for the playoffs, battling for playoff position, and it showed. The Lynx held on to win, but there was some tension. Bridget Carlton ejected late in the game for a flagrant foul. Satu Sabali makes free throws, gets Dallas closer. She's upset with Lynx fans who were cheering for her injury. She calls them disgusting on Twitter, or X if you prefer to call it now, after the game. A lot of tensions in this game. I think the bigger takeaway is the Lynx do get the win, 91-86. Lynx players and head coach Cheryl Reeves saying, hey, fans, you can't be cheering for someone else's injury. I think 3 Lynx fans got ejected from the stands from this game. Like, what a wild finish to what was a tense but well played WNBA game at Target Center. Lynx do hold on to that win, though, still firmly in playoff position, 16-17 right now. They would be, looks like, the 6th or 7th seed if the playoffs started, 5th or 6th seed right now if the playoffs started tomorrow. They'd be in decent shape, but you can't be cheering for injuries, can't be doing stuff like that. A tense game, though, you don't really see that. And it's kind of not fun to see that level of animosity, but it is kind of fun to see something a little bit different every once in a while, and that was certainly something we saw on Tuesday night at Target Center.
MGM Wine and Spirits is the choice for savings, service, and a great selection of spirits, pre-mixed cocktails, wines, and of course, ice-cold beers and hard seltzers. With over 30 locations throughout the Twin Cities and beyond, there's an MGM near you. Head to mgmwineandspirits.com to find a convenient location in your area. Get social. Follow MGM on Facebook and Instagram for all the latest news and trends. Make great moments with MGM Wine and Spirits, your locally owned and operated choice for over 50 years. Save time, save money. Shop MGM.
It's good to be joined again by Jeff Day, Star Tribune sports writer and editor. I think we officially call you a multi-platform editor, but I don't know if that really... I know what that means, but I don't think it does. I don't think it does you justice, Jeff, because you do a lot. But you appear on this podcast some. You've done a few really good things with me here lately, and I wanted to talk to you again about Gopher volleyball because that season is right around the corner on Friday. And as we've talked about, Jeff, a program that's really raising its profile, if that's even possible. But I just feel like it's seeped even more into the public consciousness over the last 2, 3, 4 years. And is now like really one of those kind of programs on campus that we pay attention to, and for good reason. But a lot of interesting things with this team that we'll definitely get into. A new head coach, Keegan Cook, that you profiled in Monday's Star Tribune and on startribune.com. Jeff, welcome. And what do you think of the season ahead? Because there sure is some interesting storylines for us to dive into.
Yeah, I went to the scrimmage that they hosted against Northern Iowa on Friday night, and you can just see that the team has a great deal of talent, but is still in discovery mode, if you will. And part of that is just the nature of college athletics these days. Rosters have turnover, but I think the bigger thing here is that you did have this transitionary time between two coaching staffs. And what that created was roster movement that maybe was more aggressive than you might have typically seen if there was some continuity. Maybe not. I mean, who knows exactly? But they lose two very crucial players. You get this influx of 3 new transfers. You have 2 freshmen that seem like, they can play now if they needed to. On top of that, you have a whole slew of returning players that have extremely high expectations. So on Friday, I was watching thinking, this is going to be fun, especially early. They play a really challenging schedule, and you can just tell that there's an element of what combinations are going to work, who's going to be out here. I think there's going to be some fluctuation in lineups and mixing and matching. And I just think they're an exciting team. I think that despite the losses, you think about losing players that have the kind of pedigree and accolades that a Carter Booth and a Jenna Wennis have, and you're like, wow, how does a team rebound from that? I think they have. I think they're going to be very dangerous. I don't know what their ceiling is. I think it's hard to know. College volleyball in particular, there's some top heaviness to the talent pools. There's really, really elite teams at the very top, and that is spreading more so you can feel it. We'll see, like on TCU, for instance, when they open the season against them
on Friday. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an unranked team, but that's a team that people think could have some potential. And last year we saw it, like the Gophers lost to Northwestern. They had a couple other matches where they sort of, tripped up a little bit, not just losing to the blue blood programs. So this is a long-winded answer of just saying that they're going to be challenged early. And I think on top of the excitement of the matches that they're playing, there's going to be a lot of excitement about what is this roster? Who is going to sort of start to identify themselves? Or is it going to be a team that really relies on, call it 9, 10 people to give you something on a given night? I mean, I do think there is room for a lot of these players to get time on the court, depending on matchups and depending on who's playing. Because top to bottom, the depth of the roster is really solid.
Now, you profiled Keegan Cook, their new head coach. You talked about, you followed him kind of throughout the offseason, kind of saw what he had to go through just to kind of get this roster assembled, but also kind of start to, enforce is the wrong word, but kind of like imprint his style or kind of, communicate how he wants his program run. And I'm sure there's some differences to how he runs things versus how Hugh McCutcheon ran things, although it does seem like they have some similarities as well. As you've kind of studied Keegan Cook so far, how would you describe kind of that transition and, what he wants out of this team, either just on its own or how that might be different or similar to how Hugh McCutcheon had a lot of success here?
Yeah, the U and Keegan Cook were generous with access. So I got to see a little bit throughout the past 8 months. I've kind of just, anytime they would let me poke my head in, I poked my head in. And the first thing that I will say, and this is not an ageism thing, it just is the nature of it. This is a young coaching staff. There is a certain kind of vibrancy that is coming with some of these coaches who, now Keegan Cook comes from a very well pedigreed coaching lineage. He has been in fantastic coaching situations and shown his ability. But I think that the rest of the coaching staff has kind of seen a really great opportunity here. And I think they have formed a really cohesive unit. So while Cook is the profile piece, when I was in the gym, the thing that I was picking up on was just energy. People who are like excited about a very big opportunity that is fresh to them. McCutcheon and the Hawks, who are some of the best coaches in college volleyball, some of the best recruiters in college volleyball, had been doing it here for a decade. They were a known entity. What you get with a new coaching staff, even if it is somebody like Cook, is a freshness, a kind of set of new ideas, new energy coming into a gym. This was relayed by players who said that while they all had Hugh McCutcheon wasn't fired. He wasn't asked. Hugh McCutcheon is one of the greatest coaches ever. He brought in talent because they wanted to be with him. So you would never hear a player, and this is just true, would never hear a player say there's anything, it wasn't a better or worse kind of analogy between the two coaching staffs. It's kind of like you said, different tactics, different energy. I did hear a little bit about just pacing, practice pacing, getting involved, moving quickly, having certain attention to detail that was just different between the two coaching staffs. And Cook, I think, welcomes that challenge of trying to replace a guy like Hugh McCutcheon. You could pick up on that in talking to him. This is not something that he is intimidated by. He is calm in a way that's disconcerting. I think you're like, wow, you just have a very, very centered nature to yourself. And so I think he took each step along the way as it came over these 8 months. I think when you zoom out a little bit, to me at least, it becomes more impressive because this was not an easy task to step in and do this. And especially this, I didn't touch on this heavily in that story, but he would say that he had to keep these players here twice. 2 transfer portal sessions means that he had to sell them multiple times, because you think about someone like Taylor Landfair, right? You're reigning Big Ten Player of the Year, one of the great college athletes. She has 3 years of eligibility remaining. That seems shocking, but she has a redshirt year from an injury and she had a COVID year. So Taylor Landfair is a sophomore or something like that. I can't even really wrap my head around the year. That's shocking. But the other side of that is that meant that if another program wanted to sell her on, hey, you can come here and continue to develop and play 3 years, she could have easily left. She didn't. She decided to stay. McKenna Wooker decided to stay. Melanie Schaffmaster decided to stay. They brought in, I think Kylie Murr is probably the biggest name, but Phoebe Awalier, who is a middle blocker, who is showing some really talent. Lydia Grote, who I watched her and they are exciting. These are talented players coming in as transfers. I think they brought in some high level athletes, and Lydia is the kind of player that starred on the team that she came from, and she's going to come here and get to step into a place where, hey, you don't have to lead your team in kills. You don't have to be the A1 option on this team. You get to come in and just dominate your position because you are surrounded by players like a Landfair or Wooker or any number of, the players they have returning. So he built the roster in this kind of cauldron of, can I keep this thing afloat? And I think he did a great job with it. And there's a testament to saying, when you replace a person like McCutcheon, there's maybe 2 ways to view it. One is the cupboard's bare, right? We all know that the U has great athletes. So you're coming into a situation where some people from the outside might look and go, what a lucky situation for you as a coach. The flip side of that is that there is no guarantee anymore in college athletics that any of those athletes are going to stay. You know what I mean? That is over now. So he had to work, I think, very hard to maintain that. And so there is an element of, hey, before a game has been played, you have shown something to these players that they're willing to stick with you. So to me, it just makes, I love it. I think it's so, I don't know about you. What did you think when McCutcheon resigned? Was there any part of you that wondered, how do you replace a person like this?
Well, yeah, and it kind of led into what I was going to ask you next. I want to get into some of the schedule and the roster now, but I think that it's such an unusual thing. You very rarely see a coach who is really highly successful, and maybe you don't necessarily see this coming. Like, you might have a highly successful coach, and then there's they're getting to be retirement age. You kind of see a succession plan. Yes. 1 or 2 years down the line, you maybe are grooming an assistant coach or a former assistant who's gone somewhere and done great things to be the next in line. Or what typically happens, I think, in 80 or 90% of these job searches is that the team is underperformed in some way, or the message needs to change. Like, I think of probably every other case in Gophers athletics where there's been a major coaching change lately, like women's basketball. Things just weren't getting done under Lindsay Whalen. They changed course and went with Don Plitzowite. I think about men's basketball, Richard Pitino, same thing when they hired Ben Johnson. Yeah. Gopher hockey, like Don Lucia had a certain amount of success here, but things were starting to kind of go on the other side. They go out and get Bob Motzko. Same with Gopher football. They wanted a new voice in PJ Fleck. This is a much different kind of unique kind of hire. So when you lose someone like McCutcheon, you're coming into a completely different situation where you're not, like, a lot of times when you come into a situation, you're trying to fix something. He's not trying to fix something. And instead, he's trying to build on something that got to a very high level. And I think that's almost, it's a certain amount of pressure that maybe you don't have when you're coming into something and saying, hey, if we can just go a little over 500, people are going to be ecstatic because they're so used to this being bad.
Yeah, absolutely right. It reminds me, I was thinking about this because one of my favorite tiffs in recent sports history here in Minnesota was when Jerry Kill would get all upset when PJ would talk about year zero.
The culture.
Culture. This is, you're exactly right. That's why, to me, it is fascinating, because how do you measure success here? What does success look like? And I think in some ways it's incremental. It's not going to be loud. I mean, if they come out and beat TCU, beat Baylor, this is not to world build, but it's like, and then they're going in to play number 1 Texas here on Tuesday, and you're going to start feeling these traditional markers of success, right? Like, oh, can they play da da da? To me, this is still a thing that is in motion, still trying to feel itself out with no real firm footing underneath itself. But because of the past pedigree and the expectations, I think, that a lot of people have about the Gophers volleyball program, he might quickly be thrust into a situation where the expectations are far higher than anybody would expect for a first-year coach 3 games into their career. And how he manages that is going to be equally fascinating. How his players manage that. I was talking to Kylie Murr about this, and she was saying that she dealt with a coaching change when she was at Ohio State. And she was saying that one of the reasons that she was excited to come here was because she had a history with this. She was going to need to go someplace new no matter what this season, but she also looked at the roster, saw the talent level, and then she sees this new coaching staff, and she was like, not only did she like what she was hearing from them, but she also, I think, liked the role she could play of helping with transitions, because what she said was, you are going to run into adversity. And when you are brand new, when you are new players, new staff, new teams, all of this stuff, you're going to need to have some real resolve in those moments, because this isn't one of those things where if you're losing, it's the expectation. Oh, it's a new year, it's a new team. You're going to have to quickly figure out how to fix the problems that you find with, what's the roster at 15 players, 14 players that all have high expectations for themselves. So watching them on Friday gave me a glimpse of it. I think they're going to be a lot of fun. They have a ton of talent. They're really athletic. You lose Carter Booth, and it's like, okay, that's intimidating. But like this Calissa Minity, who's a freshman, she's super springy. And Erica Davis is another one. Their middle blockers are very, very in motion. And, Murr, somewhere this year, you will talk to Kylie Murr. I just know it. She is she's the perfect interview. She's she sits down next to you. You can kind of feel the room start to vibrate. She's got a ton of energy. She was talking, not trash, but she was just questioning the official with very, very vocally in the middle of an exhibition match.
Okay. Yeah. Right.
She's great.
Self-assured. She is self-assured, it sounds like.
Yeah, no doubt. And confident. Yeah. Self-assured. Yes. So anyway, this is a long word. I just speak in paragraphs when I talk about this team, but
that's okay.
Yeah, I just think that when it comes to the start of the season, it's going to be fascinating to watch how all of these pieces deal with their internal expectations, or what Cook calls aspirations, versus the reality of being a new group of people being put into this non-conference schedule it's insane. That's an insane non-conference schedule. They could lose 6 matches. It's like there's tons of opportunity for them to really get tested here. So I think we're going to continue to learn a lot about them.
Well, and the one similarity I see between Cook and McCutcheon, I think there's more than one, but it feels like, and this is maybe not uncommon with coaches these days who maybe have a different approach. It's not like the winning is and everything is the only thing kind of coaching style of yesteryear, but he seems very process driven. And, an anecdote from your story, he was kind of, talking about how you can be sloppy, and if it leads still to a successful point, you still need to understand that the process that got you there is flawed, and you need to fix that because it won't always work that way. You're going to get chewed up by, the best teams, and you're playing a lot of the best teams. Am I getting the right track? That he seems like McCutcheon, he seems very process driven. And like I said, that's not necessarily uncommon for a coach, but they seem to kind of have that same mentality where the process will take you to the result you want.
He was telling me, that one of the things that he was trying to do early was build a comfortability with this player so that he could start being negative with them. I don't mean negative rude. I mean negative, critical, constructive.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that he tries to do that. I didn't go too hard on the analytics side of things in this story because I think he's a kind of a mixture coach of some coaches get tabbed with that analytic. Rocco Baldelli came in with this mindset, and so did Falvey and Levine. You know what I mean? Certain sports just lend themselves to that kind of labeling. He didn't quite strike me that way. He has an old school mentality of people first, relationship first, build it from the ground up. And then once you get to know each other, once you get to trust each other, now I'm going to attack you with what's going wrong. And we're going to they have this coach of theirs who, his name's Sankey Sani, and I'm going to forget his title right now, but he is a really cool young man who does all of their data analysis. Okay. And he produces instantaneous statistical analysis of what they're doing. I'm talking in practice. So we're talking about practice. He's sitting there.
Not a game.
Not a game. But I was watching one of their fall practices, and he's sitting there with his computer charting every touch, just in real time. He's a wizard. And then Cook is coming over to him in the break asking, what was our serve air percentage during these drills? It's not even
serve air percentage. Wow.
Yes.
I'm like, okay, so I love getting into the weeds on data, and I've tried on volleyball a couple times. I think I asked McCutcheon about it several years ago, but I think the sports where it's so fluid, I feel like it's sometimes hard to get good data because so many things depend on so many other things. So I love serve air percentage because that is you can isolate that. That is something you can definitely isolate.
Yes. And he also was doing attack air percentage, which is, they kind of look at, I think the way that they would describe it is when you have an attack that should be effective, what are our air percentages on those hits? When are the hits not land? So they're very detailed. And Sankey does this work where he showed me once someday I'm going to write a story about him, about how rare it is that the ball touches a body in a volleyball match. It's this thing that I continue to be fascinated by because it speaks to how, just like you're saying, analysis of the sport is difficult because it is so fluid. Everything is always in movement. That's where I think Cook fits in with this analytic mindset because he tries to dig down into those microseconds. When I was in that film session, I am not kidding you. When I am talking millisecond, 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 image, where are your feet? Where is your body? Where are your arms? What are you doing out here? What is happening to you in this position? And all the girls are sitting there. And I talked to McKenna Wooker about this one day. I was like, what's it like to go to school and have the subject be you, and you're just taking in data about your own performance all the time. But they seem to thrive in that arena if the relationship is strong enough to feel comfortable to build and to say that we're just trying to get to a place where you're operating at your peak. So the differentiation between him and Hugh, I think is really early. I think it's difficult to say. I think that they are cut from a similar cloth in terms of that core thing being personal before success driven, before whatever kind of metric you want to use for how you define collegiate athletics and what it means to be successful. I do think they both come from that place of, I want to have a feeling of meaning something to these athletes that's beyond just being, wins and losses and stuff like that. So I think that will play out, but I do think he does seem deeply analytical and he's excited by that, which I refuse to call people some of the derogatory terms we use for mathematical minded people, but there is something about a person who's really excited about numbers and that kind of stuff. And they've got a good staff to work with it. So, to me, it's as exciting as any sporting hire we've had in a long time because of all of these just unique elements to it.
Final thing, Jeff Day, before I let you go, we've talked kind of about killer schedule. Once you get to the Big Ten play, it doesn't let up, obviously, because some of the best teams in the country, they're still ranked in the top 10. They've got a lot of good players coming back. I mean, process takes you so far. The results are sometimes, more or less what you're judged on, especially by the people who just go and attend the matches. What's a reasonable expectation for a first-year coach who had tons of success at Washington, who's replacing a very highly respected coach with a lot of good players still on this roster? Like, what do you think is a reasonable, tangible result at the end of this season?
At the end of the season, I think that their expectations are as high as they come. I think trying for me to predict that would be stupid. But everybody I talk to, this is something that's a little bit different, at least outwardly, expression from the team and from the coaching staff, that they have those very high expectations of trying to, by the time they get into conference play, being a much better team than they are today, ready to contend for a conference title, ready to contend for an NCAA championship, ready to host 2 rounds of the NCAA, 4 rounds, 4 rounds of the NCAA tournament, getting back to that level of, a top 3-4 team in the country. But again, what happens if it gets sloppy early or things aren't clicking right away? How do they respond to that? I don't know. I mean, he told me, I'm not going to share the things that he is specifically, I'm not trying to ruin his secrets of how he wants to start his career here, but there is an element of, he views the start of the season as being a time, and this is in the story, be good, not perfect. Early on, if the team shouldn't be striving to be playing apex type all the time. It's like you need to understand each other. So be solid, do your best work, but don't get too caught up in trying to be over the top. I think that's something that maybe I picked up on a little bit of, him saying that players were showing an over eagerness to perform, I guess, as I'm finding words in my own brain to describe what he was saying. And so I think what he wants in these early matches is just establish your stuff, get us to a good base level. And his feeling is that early in the season, you can win matches by just being steady, find that steady space, and then grow into the ultimate form of what this can be. But like Kylie Murr told me, she's like, this is my final stretch in college volleyball. I'm here for one reason and one reason only. I don't think anybody can look at the talent on this team and say there's any reason that they shouldn't, at the very minimum, be able to compete for a Big Ten title, to compete with Nebraska and Wisconsin, who are also, juggling big lineup changes and trying to figure out new players on their rosters. They'll play Stanford early. Stanford is, I think most people, even though I think they might be third in the AVCA poll, a lot of people think Stanford's the best team in the country because they return everybody. And so that'll be a good litmus test. We'll see early, okay, where you, and of course they're going to play number 1 Texas. That will be a good litmus test. And Baylor on Saturday will be a good litmus test. Yeah. Everybody's a good litmus test. The crazy thing to me is that their Big Ten schedule has some breathing room in it, which hasn't been the case because they only play Wisconsin once. That provides you a little bit of breathing room. They get Nebraska home and home, which I think will be really exciting. And I don't know, but I would say at the end of the year, their aspirations are that they're going to be one of the best volleyball teams in the country, and they're going to be able to sit there and say, we have a chance to win a title. No different than it was last year. And that's an accomplishment in its own right, that they can say right here, start of the season, this team is good enough, has the talent of, if we can put it together, we should be able to play with anybody.
Nope, that's the program they have built. Those are the expectations they have set, and season starts Friday. I will look forward to watching it, reading about your coverage of it. Jeff Day, appreciate it as always, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, thank you.
Good stuff from Jeff Day. Love talking volleyball with him, among other things. And like we said, That season starts Friday against TCU, Baylor right after that. Those games at the Maturi Pavilion. Good chance to go see that team early, and then the Big Ten season will obviously be a great one as well. Lots of great teams in that conference. So looking forward to that season, and Jeff always does a great job writing about that team and talking about them. Let us finish with the cooler. If you haven't read it yet, Patrick Royce did a terrific job handling a very tough story. Gustavus Adolphus women's hockey team, you probably saw at some point this week, horrific car crash claimed the life of one player and 3 others injured in that accident. Go read that story, StarTribune.com. Patrick handles these things really well with empathy and with typical Patrick writing style. Just I can't even imagine just kind of the emotions in this situation. I'm shaken up by it, just reading about it, just as as a dad, all these young players, 19, 20 years old, just a terrible, terrible story, but a tale well told, the humanity of it all by Patrick Royce. So go check that out, please, if you get a chance. That will do it for today. Expecting to talk to Adrian Heath, Minnesota United manager, later this week for a show, as well as Ben Feldman, the head coach and founder of the Minnesota Wind Chill. Big ultimate championships this weekend at TCO Stadium. Minnesota is in the semifinals. Those games on Friday, the championship on Saturday, and that whole weekend out at TCO at Eagan, the Vikings practice headquarters in that stadium. So expecting to have that later this week as well. Until then, I'm Michael Rand, back at it again on Thursday.